Hello, the doc is back after a extended break that I'm not explaining in this video whatsoever. If you're watching this video for the first time, because you probably are somebody new, hi, we're checking out Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 225, the continuation of Gojo versus Sukuna. I'm not going to do any recap, what's going to happen in the chapter. Alright, so coming out the last chapter, right? The fight just begun, get a beautiful back and forth between Gojo and Sukuna, right? Gojo's stunting on Sukuna, but Sukuna's not mad about it. Well, he's mad about it in the same way he'd be mad about anybody attempting to stunt on him, which is that, like, how dare you try to disrespect me as if I can't kill you at any given moment. But, you know, obviously it's not that easy, because it's not like Sukuna's not trying. Gojo's just got the hands, just like Sukuna. Nonetheless, this chapter decides to start off with the rest of the team, right? So far, we've just been focused on Gojo versus Sukuna. We didn't see anybody in the last chapter. This chapter, we're pretty much seeing everybody throughout the whole thing. And honestly, I feel like this is Gege giving his little take on community conversation about the fight versus Sukuna and Gojo, where basically we have the whole crew basically discussing like the win cons for Gojo and Sukuna, lose cons, their strengths, their weaknesses, who's got the better win possibilities, who's got the better chances of winning, what are their possible win scenarios, what are their loss scenarios, why aren't they doing this, why should they do this, and so on and so forth. It's full on like fight commentary kind of beat. Obviously this isn't publicized. Well, the conversation is not being publicized. Maybe it's definitely publicizing the fight, but yeah, it's pretty much like the general context for this whole chapter. And if you participate or watch any Jujutsu Kaisen YouTubers, check out the comments, go on the Reddit, the Discord, whatever. Pretty much, this is exactly the kind of conversation. This is what it looked like in person. The conversation that happens online. So we start off with a little bit of clarification that basically Sukuna, during the altercation where Gojo's hand meets Sukuna's hand, right, and then Gojo goes into a toss, right, and we get a little explanation of like what domain explication is. At this point you should know it, but basically how Kusakabe actually breaks it down in more simpler terms is basically you're putting a simple domain over your entire body, and so the way this simple domain works is that it basically absorbs the technique of the opponent, therefore making it so that then whatever their ability is now moot, allowing Sukuna to bypass the limitless and get attack off. Only problem with it is that you can't use your innate technique while you're using domain amplification. Therefore, as Kurusu posits, is that, well, considering that's the situation, then that kind of makes it a hindrance towards Sukuna. But if Sukuna had an alternate way to bypass the limitless besides domain amplification, then he would basically win, because he'd be able to theoretically use his technique and eliminate the limitless all at the same time. Miwa, then copping off of this little part of the conversation, then goes into the idea of, well, shouldn't Sukuna just go ahead and use his domain expansion? Wouldn't that effectively be like a huge win con for him? You could just use that, bypass the limitless, and get a whole bunch of free hits. And then basically everyone goes into discussion about, well, these two domains clashing, barrierless versus barriered, they don't even know how that would really work. Who would win out? Would Sukuna win out? Would Gojo outright win out? And so on and so forth. Shoko actually points out that if there was a possibility that Gojo could outright win with his domain, he probably would have used it already, considering the fact of his 6 eyes. He would kind of be able to like ascertain this information through like just seeing curse energy and so on. Previously in the spoilers, it kind of seemed like this line by Shoko sounded like he could read minds, but in this line, this version of it seems more akin to the idea of like, oh, because of the 6 eyes, he'd be able to tell if he could just outright win a domain clash. If he's still not using his domain, that probably means that based on the information he's seen, it isn't a clear-cut fact that he can outright win, making it kind of pointless to do so. And then Choso brings up a good point that it seems like a lot of people weren't fully aware of. I mean, we as viewers who kind of see the story from an overview standpoint, we knew this, but apparently not everybody knew that Sukuna didn't have a barrier on his domain expansion. And so then we get a little shock voice from like a bunch of people. Kusakabe gets shocked, which a lot of hype for, well, not hype, but like a little bit of gas on Kusakabe considering how knowledgeable and how much of a, it seems like he's just like on top of his stuff, grade 1 sorcerer he is. Kashimo's like, that's crazy. Hakari's like, that's crazy. Even Yuta, second only to Gojo, apparently he's in 3rd place overall because he's like, whoa, no barrier, that's crazy. Which, once again, when you put in perspective, all the characters who are reacting this way, technically they haven't actually seen the fact that Sukuna doesn't have a barrier. Everybody who's seen it tends to be dead. So there wouldn't really be too much information going around, like unless it was specifically discussed by Itadori to other people or even to Gojo, there wouldn't really be much reason to explain that, well, Sukuna has an open barrier. It's like, if you get caught in a barrier, even if he had a barrier domain, if you get caught in his domain, you're just gonna die. That's kind of it. A sure hit from Sukuna, you're dying. There's not really much else to discuss. So, proceeding on from there, Kusakabe kind of like discusses with Miwa because she in the real reaction panel is kind of confused about, you know, how crazy is that? And so it basically gives a little analogy of like he asks for water. Miwa passes him a water bottle. He says he gives her back the water bottle. He's basically like, if I didn't ask for the bottle, I just asked for water. Miwa then proceeds to splash him in the face. Kusakabe gets mad. Peak moment, honestly, best chapter of the year if you ask me, just because of this moment. Going from there, everybody basically pauses about the fact that like how insane it is, just the concept of having no barrier on your domain really is. Basically discussing the idea of like, how do you even accumulate water without a container? In essence, that is what Sukuna's doing, which is that he's taking his cursed energy, or water in a sense, and he's making it so that then it's accumulating and in a sense distorting the world around him to be his curse technique, therefore creating an area where his curse technique is law. Or in other words, he's making an aquarium without actually creating a barrier or a glass or tank for the water to sit in, yet still dispersing enough of it to allow for various sea creatures to live inside. It is kind of a way to think about it. But throughout this conversation, Megumi ends up being brought up because his Commander Shower Garden appears to have no barrier, but Kusakabe clarifies that it's not nearly the same thing, where Megumi's Commander Shower Garden, his domain expansion, uses the literal surroundings as his barrier. He's not just letting it all hang out in a sense. Sukuna literally is just taking over the space around him. I mean, there's really just no better way to put it, right? And so the discussion continues. From there, the conversation continues on to Kenjaku, since he also has an open domain, and Yuki in their clash, where basically, you know, as we know, Yuki uses simple domain. Tengen tries to destroy Kenjaku's domain. It doesn't work. Yuki gets nagged. It's a terrible time. And Choso posits like, oh, well, maybe if she would have used her domain. And this is where we get into the discussion of what would even happen if a barrierless domain and a barrier domain even clash. Like, who would win out in that situation? And they kind of go back and forth about it, and it kind of ends up going into this discussion about like, would it even be bad for either one of them to use their barriers? Like, obviously, as people who only have a barrier, if not don't have a domain expansion, they can't really test this and or figure out how exactly that outcome would turn out, since so few people actually have barrierless domains. So they kind of go into the idea of like, oh, well, you know, isn't it dangerous to use domains in the first place? Like, if they don't even know how it's going to turn out, if they have a domain clash, it might be better to not use one unless absolutely necessary. To which ends up being discussed by Irumaki, Auspicious Beast guy, can't remember his name off the top of my head, and Kashimo, where they kind of go into the fact that like both Gojo and Sukuna have like insane curse technique efficiency. Gojo has basically has a perpetual curse energy machine going on where he's healing himself, right? He's healing, not only is he healing himself, but he's also using his cursed energy at such a like minimal, like such an efficient way that his natural regeneration of cursed energy replenishes how much he uses, therefore making it so that then if he wants to use infinite domain expansions, technically he can. Now, there is a small limit to that in the fact that because domain expansions use up so much energy, it may not fit within his natural regeneration of cursed energy limit, but the idea still stands that like he's using so little that he can realistically go on in this fight forever without using his domain expansion 5 times. And even then 5 times might gas him out a little bit, but that's 5 different domain expansions. It's a lot. But Kashimo then says don't take away from Sukuna. Sukuna doesn't have the 6 eyes, yet uses his cursed energy very efficiently as well. Not only this, but Yuta even hypes Sukuna up a little, and he's like, hey, based on what I can see, Sukuna got double the cursed energy reserves I have. Mind you, people are touting Yuta as like the guy when it comes to cursed energy, just reserves. One guy by himself, no Rika, is like, I got more than you. From there though, well, everybody's discussing this, and obviously we're having this deep discussion about like how's Sukuna supposed to be able to beat Gojo? Can Gojo just outright beat Sukuna, and so on and so forth? Well, Higuruma says, hey guys, you guys might want to look at the screen. I think our discussion is becoming reality.
領域展開福間水師
Domain expansion clash is a beautiful visual, and the narrator hops in. He's like, oh, two of the basically, I'm gonna give my own little narration. 2 of the strongest open their domains, and a clash happens, and here we are, evenly matched. Evenly matched within the barrier, mind you, because on the outside, Sukuna is king, and he's obliterating the area. We already saw what Sukuna does when he activates his ability. Nothing is safe at all. He's obliterating the area around him. Mind you, this is outside of Gojo's barrier, while inside Gojo's safe. Until we realize something very, 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 very bad. As Yuji explains, the barrier of a domain is weak against attacks from the outside. Shredded, the barrier is destroyed as Sukuna wins the domain battle and immediately gets the slice off on Gojo. Mind you, it's a neck cut. Alright, that's death, effectively. Now, is this death outright? Probably not. I feel like there's clearly just a cliffhanger. It's probably just a cliffhanger. Somehow, some way, Gojo's gonna get out of this, whether that be he just outright teleports out of this and just pew, which people were theorizing about, whether it be that somehow Gojo's able to negate the power of Sukuna's domain expansion and is taking currently superficial damage rather than just outright deadly amounts of damage. I don't know, but as it stands right now, it's not looking good. If you're a Gojo fan, such as myself, it's not looking good. All right, I'm a Sukuna fan too. I love me a good Sukuna fight, but that is not good whatsoever. But yeah, that's it for the chapter. Really good chapter. No break next week, so next week we're gonna find out exactly how this turns out. Like I said, my assumption is that Gojo's not gonna die here just because it would just come kind of out of, I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but it would kind of like be like, so after all this time, we only got 2 chapters of fight, and the second chapter was mostly just conjecture from the team about what's gonna happen in the fight. It kind of sucked. Now, given this is accurate, if he dies here, I can't be mad about it from a technical standpoint of like, well, we know domains supersede techniques, basically. So as long as Gojo's in the domain, he's vulnerable to attacks. And as long as he's vulnerable to attacks, Sukuna wins. There's not really much else to discuss. Obviously, like I said, there's something's gonna happen that's gonna get Gojo out of here, and therefore make it so that then, you know, the fight continues at least for another 2 to 3 chapters. But yeah, this is KK left us on quite the cliffhanger. But I think that's about it for this chapter. This chapter was really good. I like the Kusakabe hype. Not that I'm a fan of Kusakabe or anything. I'm not buying Kusakabe stocks. But it is interesting to see just how, like, I wouldn't say dominant, but how knowledgeable he is in this whole conversation. That he like knows all this stuff and knows about how domain amplification works. He's able to explain exactly what barrierless domain even really is in like pretty articulate and analogous way. I do enjoy the fact that there was even a domain expansion at all, domain clash at all between Gojo and Sukuna. That's right there, peak. It was necessary. Now I just need my 3-way domain now, and honestly, I'm living pretty. Other than that, not too much else to discuss. It's a lot of just discussion about the fight and conjecture that just happens in the community already. People have talked about these concepts and ideas ad nauseum plenty of times, so I'm not really gonna break that down too much. That said, thank you for watching the video. I returned to YouTube, so if you're a fan of mine, well, one of the 47 of you, if you're a fan of mine, I'm back, boys. That all said, thank you for watching, and the dog is out. Peace.